Well, welcome. Thanks for coming. You guys, we're going to be asked for a little bit of interaction, but not nearly as much as during Casey's chat. So we're here today to talk about, one, road mapping, but two, about the MIB and the defense industry. There's a lot of conversation around there being money out for defense, or I really want to do work for defense, but I can't get in. And so the goal of today is really to break that down, help you understand a little bit about it, about what the barriers are, and what road mapping is for companies that aren't interested in defense. There's a lot of similarities in what we would do as MassMEP with you. So, first introductions.
I'm in the wrong spot, probably. We're not going to do anything with defense contracts. I just don't.
No, you're not in the wrong spot.
Okay.
You're not in the wrong spot.
All right.
We'll talk about both.
Perfect.
But you're going to try to figure out how to make countertops for the defensive.
Are you supposed to be in the CESMII road mapping one?
Yes.
Okay, you're in the right one.
Okay.
So, I'm the Director of Innovative Growth Services for MassMEP. I help companies with both strategy and technology and marrying the two together, right? Before here, I worked for GE. Often there were very, very good deployments of new technology or just technology in general, and some that would sit for a really long time. Either there wasn't buy-in from the team, the programming was such that we couldn't get it up and going, a whole bunch of things that everybody encounters whenever they buy a new piece of technology. So that's primarily what I'm helping with, and we got a team of 2 individuals here with me that we work with to talk about this effort. So, Brian?
Yeah, Brian Kononchik, VP of R&D at Boston Engineering. Boston Engineering is a government contractor, engineering services, as well as we support commercial and medical verticals. I'm a career, I would say, technology innovator, product developer, but also have spent a lot of time in modernization and transformation strategies for medium and large organizations.
Thanks. Owen?
I'm Owen with Acceleration Engineering. We do a couple of things. We mentor existing companies in the defense industry through design, engineering services, manufacturing, supplier oversight, and qualification efforts. We help small businesses that are looking to get into the defense industry, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about 2 categories of efforts there, compliance and due diligence. I'll touch on those in a little bit. And then we're also currently working on expanding our footprint into a design, engineering, and qualification facility here in Massachusetts, ultimately for the Navy.
So, what I want to start off with is a series of, just actually one question. What makes a manufacturer successful, in your opinion? Shout it out. What makes you successful?
Quality product.
Quality. Quality. Efficiency. There's no wrong answers here unless it's like poor product. That would not make you effective.
Niche market.
Market.
Voice of the customer.
Customer. How about you two friends over here? What makes a manufacturer successful?
I guess selling stuff.
Cost.
Right.
Okay, so in the world of Ellen's brain, this is how I think what makes manufacturers successful is it's a set of things that have to work together. The first is your workforce, right? That's your primary. Without a workforce, you can't make anything. Which that's intunes culture, safety, knowledge, how you're training them, are you engaging them? Their reputation, your reputation, right, in the market. For quality product, on-time delivery, price, speed. Then your profitability. Are you making any money? You can do these 2 things, but not make any money, you're not going to be a very good business, right? So, again, cost, price, operational efficiencies. But then with all of that, like, how are you going to get all of that done, right? What's your strategy to do it? And for me, we've been working as MassMEP, we do a lot of things, right? those of you who know MassMEP might know us for like one slice of a pie, but we do a lot of different things. It might be lean, it might be ISO, it might be CMMC, but really it's about where are you today and where you want to go and how do we help you there? How do we help you get there? And so we've established a road mapping process, right? For any company, defense or not defense, right? To help companies understand where are they trying to go and where are they at today, based on what we're hearing both from the company and from industry. So to do that, you gotta know where the heck you're going. If I walk into a company and start helping them with something that I see as important, but they want to sell in 2 years, like, might not be the best idea if I'm thinking like, hey, we want to grow this company for the long haul and make it the most efficient thing. Might not be the best thing to do if you're looking to sell, right? So always understanding what your true north is, right? You're looking to double in the next 2 years, right? You'd be targeting different things. So understanding what your true north is the very first thing of the engagement. And then what are the stepping stones to get there, right? And measuring and how are you doing with those stepping stones. So that's where the roadmap comes in. And about a year ago or so, Richard and myself both took a course with CESMII at RPI to learn smart manufacturing road mapping, right? And that's actually where I stole those. This is True North and the stepping stones, because it really resonated with me as a very visual learner. And in taking that class, the goal of it is to understand not where you're going and what you should do for technology, right? Yes, it's smart manufacturing, and for those of you who don't know, we can certainly have a chat. It's Industry 4.0, advanced manufacturing, whatever you want to call it. But it's about the path to get there and how do all those things work together. And that tech probably isn't the first thing to go do, right? So measuring where you're at in a bunch of different areas to be able to move the needle is what road mapping is about. And so, putting together the workforce, profitability, reputation, what does that look like? And it's also about your client base, which is why a piece of what we're going to talk about today is the defense industry. There's a lot of uncertainty in the commercial environment, and there's a lot of money out there in need in defense. So understanding perhaps where you are today and pivoting and moving into defense or doing more defense to balance it out is the reason we chose to talk about this today. So what does road mapping do, right? Increases your readiness to participate in, fill in the blank here, right? Particularly right now we're working on a program with Boston Engineering for 9 roadmaps. We've completed 5 of them to work with companies that are currently in or are working very diligently to get into the submarine industrial base. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. So if you are interested at the end of this, please come talk to us. Helps with your bottom line, providing a structured approach, right? Your set of steps to improve efficiencies, reduce cost. Often it's going to be like, okay, the first thing you've got to do if you're going to make improvements might be a value stream map to understand where the heck you're at. What's your process look like? And then pipeline, right? I don't know about you, but from what I've seen, manufacturers are having a tough time attracting young talent, right? Like kids coming out of high school. I mean, from you, what do kids, I put you in as a plant, what do kids want to see when they go to work in a manufacturer, in your opinion?
They want money.
What else?
I would say this group wants to be, they have TikTok brain. They have 30 seconds worth of entertainment. So they want like a lot of dopamine really quick. They want instant gratification a lot of times. They also want to be heard. Like they want to think that they want to feel that their opinion of whatever's going on matters. That's what's going to keep them. Because if you don't like build that relationship with them, you've lost them. At least that's what I've noticed in my classes, and maybe different in other places. But you know, this last 4 or 5 years of seniors, that's what I've seen.
And it's a balancing act. Thanks for that. It's a balancing act, right? Of your current talent, right, and your new talent coming in. And if we're going to continue to build up manufacturing and keep filling those jobs, understand how to balance that. And some of that's going to be technology, right? And they want to be able to use tech, or they want to be able to have an input. Understanding where your business is at in terms of attracting, retaining, and what you're willing to take on, right? I can make recommendations, but it's really about where you're at and where you want to go. So, what does that process look like, right? It starts with discovery, a site walkthrough, understanding what your business objectives are, and then voice of business interviews, because at all different levels, your CFO is going to have one opinion, the president's going to have another, the shop floor is going to have another, your quality guy is going to have another opinion. What are your challenges? What are your opportunities? Right? And so separating those, having those interviews, and then bringing them together to understand, this is what we heard. Right? This is what we heard for opportunities and challenges. And then some brainstorming of like, okay, so what does this mean and how are you going to handle that? And oh, by the way, you're not going to fix it all this year. Right? There's like way too many gears to turn to change everything. So deciding what you're going to do as a team, in what order, and who is going to do it is what road mapping is about. So we put together, and then resource allocation, right? I can't forget that because it's always the one that gets left out. And you say you're going to go do a bunch of stuff, and then you don't say who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and how they're going to get it done. You got to like allow them the time and set the goals, and all of those things are extremely important to make any of this successful. So what is it?
Question.
Yeah.
Who do you have as an executive sponsor when you go to do these things?
So it depends on the company, right? For one company who's in here right now, it is their lead of sales. Other companies, it's the owner. Other companies, it's an engineer. Whoever the owner puts, the owner or president or whomever really is going to be the one bought in, right? Because time and time again, MassMEP's work with companies. We go in, we try and do something, we're being pulled in by somebody, and if this guy doesn't approve, not that he needs to be involved, but if he doesn't approve, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to sustain. And there's nothing more frustrating than having everybody churn and try and get something done, and then, like, you're better off not even trying it, right? So, sponsor. And then the person who we're working with day to day in interacting and saying, okay, yes, I'll make everybody available, and depends on who that is. Good question. Thank you for stopping me. So this is the operational profile we put together. This is not intended for you to read, but just to get an understanding that based on those conversations, based on the walkthrough, based on the interaction and what we see and what we hear, put together an operational profile from workforce, digital transformation, production utilization, supply chain, and market growth and strategy. Where are you, right? Long-term vision and strategy, no strategic plan. So where do you want to go? What's reasonable to do in the next 3 to 5 years? And you're not going to move all of those things all the way to the right, right? So it's getting real with like, okay, I really want to focus on moving everything a little bit, or do I really want to focus on digital transformation because it's really important to my customer right now? Having that conversation. And then saying, okay, this is where you're at, and that was a real company that we've worked with on this process. This is a real company, where are you, and then where do you want to go, and what's the plan to get there? So we took that process and adapted it for the Maritime Industrial Base. Brian's going to talk a little bit about that, and like I said, we have several possible openings to go do this process with companies that are in this space. So do you want to talk a little bit about what MIB is?
Yeah, I'm going to first start by saying $800 million followed up with a roughly $2 billion proposed bill, with $1 billion of that specifically geared towards strengthening the Maritime Industrial Base. Maritime Industrial Base includes naval surface and naval underwater vessels. That program, that initiative originally was for submarines only, but as command changed, they saw the importance of surface vessels as well, bundled it together. But the focus really is on the underwater aspect. Submarines right now, and the manufacturing of submarines is the #1 most critical thing our country needs to do for national security. We need to be able to build what they call 1+2. 1 new boomer, or boomer replacement, the Columbia, and 2 Virginia-class submarines a year. Our Ohio's, they are starting to retire next year. They've already had their life at sea expanded 5 years to take that to 2030. Boats need to come out of the water because they're just like 40 years old now, and we need to put new boats in the water. But those boats to put in are not available. They're not built yet. So what the Navy did is they established the Maritime Industrial Base, and they recently, as of like last November, maybe a little more than a year ago now, gave $800 million to a contracting office, Blue Forge Alliance, to distribute to the supply chain in order to increase the velocity of parts and products through to the major tier 1 suppliers of submarine manufacturing, GDEB, HII, Newport News. This program that we have with MassMEP and a couple of their partners takes a piece of that $800 million to engage with the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers, develop a roadmap and a strategy to increase that velocity of your parts and your products through that supply chain. It also is there to help onboard new suppliers into that industrial base and be a part of that supply chain, and really be a part of major programs that will be sustainable for 10, 20, 30 years. We have some companies now we're talking to, they're signing contracts on work that they're not going to start for another 15 years. That means they have 15 years plus of pipeline waiting for them to execute on. They'll never run out of work, right? So those are the types of contracts that these programs can offer. But there's 2 major problems right now in building those boats fast enough. Workforce and, like I've been saying, supply chain. A lot of workforce, and when I say workforce, I mean it at the major supplier level. So your electric boat, your HII, the manufacturers, they just don't have enough workers to build the boat. It's delaying the schedule. But the other part, the part that we are able to control more as a program, is the supply chain, the velocity of parts through that supply chain to get to that tier 1. Next slide. So this is a case study of an active company going through this program with us right now. Tier 2 supplier, as you see, 7,000 plus employees, $3 billion revenue. They supply a major system to the Columbia class program. They also supply a bunch of other major systems to some surface vessels like DDGs and whatnot. So one of their largest challenges is getting enough suppliers to have that velocity and the continuity of parts coming in so they could get their equipment delivered on time. They have been forced into a number of situations into a sole supplier predicament where they are overpaying for these different parts, I think, wire harnesses in this case, overpaying for a poor quality part because they don't have the supply chain to then go diversify and get it rebid, right? So that's a challenge. So in that situation, they are looking to establish a program with the greater supplier network to invest in potential new suppliers of that wire harness component they need built so they could diversify, right? Take that risk away to the supply chain. That's just one example of what they would consider a commodity part. And they're just one supplier that does that. You keep multiplying that, that problem is occurring everywhere. So what, Ellen, myself, and our teams are there to do is we're working with the larger primes, the larger suppliers. We're also working with the smaller guys, the mom and pop machine shops, the
Coding houses.
weld shops, coating houses, whatever it may be. So we could get that connection, right? Because you're losing that communication all the way through. These smaller guys don't necessarily know about the programs available to get more funding into your business. The larger guys aren't necessarily getting the message down of where your parts are going, so you know where to look for the money. So we're trying to really work with the entire supply base by doing road mappings and strategies. But the key is we want to align your roadmap with their roadmap. We want these things to interconnect in one way or the other, because that's the only way it'll get strengthened.
And it's a really hard thing to do, right? And what we've heard many a times on both sides, talking to the large and the small, is like, we're knocking on the doors and we're not getting. But there's few of these, a gazillion of these, right? And who is really qualified to do that? It's a lot of work for these guys to go find this one diamond in the rough that can really supply what they want to the standards they want it. And so, but they also don't want this guy knocking on their door and wasting a bunch of time, right? And so it's this weird like dating game of like, how do you find the right person? And I don't have time for that, so I'm just not going to. Is really what's happening. And I get it, right? I've been on that side at GE getting like a random email from somebody, and I'm a manufacturing engineer, not sourcing, not my job, being like, hey, we can supply parts to you. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, right? And so, not an easy game, and that's what Brian and I are alluding to throughout this road mapping process. We're also finding a lot of these interconnections. So, it's a lot of work though, right? Anybody here, like, what's tough, or even for those of you who are in the defense supply chain, we talked a little bit about paperwork earlier. What's tough about getting into the defense supply chain? Anybody?
We have troubles with the timeline.
Timeline.
They're not very accurate according to what they promised in the beginning.
They change.
Yeah,
There's a lot of shift.
Yeah.
Yes, we've heard that. And part of why that is, it's a really long cycle,
Yeah.
right?
True.
When I put engines together, was like, I forecasted 3 years in advance, and if things shifted for this first part, well, then everything else moves.
A lot of that shift is the supply chain and the availability of parts and components from some other supplier you
So
never
it's his
met,
fault that
never delivered.
your thing changed, right? And it's this very interconnected weave. So that's a good one. Anybody else? What's difficult about the defense supply chain?
Getting started.
Why?
Just don't know the roadmap.
Don't know how to even get in.
Don't know.
Don't know how to even get in. Exactly. We hear that a lot too. Yeah, I'm interested, but like, I don't know. And I talked with somebody, and absolutely, it's complicated. Lots of paperwork.
I have one. If I did all the paperwork and I'm in, how do I look for a contract? Like, how do I even know where to start getting money from?
I don't know. And another one that we often hear is, okay, I got to do all this work. I'm going to spend a bunch of time doing paperwork and bidding and stuff like that. Am I going to get anything? I need to be CMMC compliant. Am I going to get anything out of that? Like, that's a lot of work, right? So that's part of what we're going to talk about today is the opportunity. And there's a zillion different ways to get in. And a lot of what I've heard is like, you got to be intentional, right? It goes back with a roadmap for your business. It also has to do with your customers. You got to be intentional and understanding what you have to what you can supply. But then, like, okay, what are the needs out there? I don't know what I can supply. I know what I have, but how do I know what they need? And that is not an easy thing to figure out. I'll tell you that right now, because it's not like the U.S. is like, hey, over here, let me just put out on the internet all of our weaknesses. Like, that wouldn't go over very well, right? So, like, there's a reason for it, but it's very frustrating. So we're going to talk, Owen's going to talk a little bit about the opportunities that are out there. Do you have a question beforehand?
In this industry, any similarities to med device where you prefer supplier list? You've got to basically get vetted out, make sure you know how to deal with the FDA, all that.
Same,
very similar.
yeah. So you have like a base list, right? In my time at GE, we called it the yellow pages, which cracked me up because it was electronic from the time I was there. But it was the yellow pages, and like you go back to the same guys because you know them, whether or not they suck, right? Because you know them, you know their quality, you've been in there, and it takes a very long time to get somebody new on because of all of the ISO qualifications, etc. However, that's to get here, right? And there's a lot of different levels you can get in. That's to get in with a big prime. There's a lot of different things you can start at, and that's what we've heard is like, a lot of people are like, hey, I started here, and then once I was in, right? And that's a little bit what Owen is going to talk about, so I'll let you go ahead.
Cool. For those of you that enjoyed my pre-breakout session humor, that's over. But, so they did a really good job teeing up a couple things for me. One, like yourself mentioning paperwork and stuff like that, and I'll jump around a little and try to bring it all together. But, you know, things that we often hear is they want to pay for paper, or they want to pay for whatever, right? Is the harsh reality, and I have told people this to their face, is not everybody is cut out to work on intercontinental ballistic missile submarines, right? There's a lot of products out there in the world. I've been at the mercy of the medical device industry and stuff like that myself. This has even a greater level of scrutiny and importance, right? So, jumping off that comment of like approved suppliers and similarity and stuff, this is another step yet beyond that. And some people just don't want to do that or don't want to handle that, but again, not everybody was meant to. And so, like, when you hear things like the paperwork portion, you're right. Like, the Navy.mil website says that a Virginia class can dive 800 plus feet, right? So that's open public information. A hull and backup valve that keeps sea pressure out on that boat, we need to know where that material came from. You need to know where it was dug out of the ground. You need to know how it was forged, and you need to know that it was x-rayed and it was done, right? And so that has a bunch of paperwork to it. To your comment about the timeline thing and stuff, right? And to what Brian said is, 2 years ago, Electric Boat had a furlough of their tradespeople. We needed submarines faster and more and all these other things. So how could the primary submarine manufacturer have a furlough of their workforce? And that was because the material wasn't there for them to actually put the boats together. So what I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right, of dollar values that exist out there. And we'll talk about, I always break things into categories, it drives people nuts, right? But there's various tiers or levels of being a supplier. And so you could be a tier 2, 3, or 4 supplying to a large tier 1 contract, or we're going to start with something really simple here and talk about fasteners. You yourself could be a tier 1 supplier. And just also to put in perspective, right, is it takes right now, last I saw, it was 68 months from the day that we start building a Virginia-class boat to the day that we finish, right? So people started driving the procurement of those items a decade ahead of time, right, in order to get there. But what we're this number up here of just over $1 billion, right, is thus far calendar year 25, and is across all open DoD contracts, with the largest contributors being the Air Force, DLA, and the Navy. DLA is kind of like the Napa auto parts of the defense industry. So you may supply to DLA. It could go to it could be a fastener. It could go to a sub. It could go to a plane. It could go any place.
Something, and it can be very simple things too, right?
Yep.
Like everything goes through there, like paper towels and stuff like that.
Yes.
Goes through there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is we're gonna talk about NICS codes, and NICS codes are categories of efforts and products that are needed by the government, regardless of what they is. So like one of those, underneath one of those NICS codes could be a intercontinental ballistic missile submarine, and under another NICS code is brawny paper towels. So there are government contractors out there, like catering companies, that will bid on contracts to go do the catering for conferences and stuff like that. So even just to get in and do that, you'd want to get in there. But we can go ahead and jump to the next one. And so there's going to be 2 quick examples here. I'm going to I'm gonna probably spend a little bit more attention on the machine shop. So in FY 24, $72 million, right? And on average, the U.S. Navy and the MIB is $43 million a year under this machine shop NICS code. And so this could be anything, nuts and bolts and fasteners is large enough that it's actually its own standalone. And general machine shop things can be plates, adapters, brackets, anything that you think of. It can be a little overwhelming at times because the variation between them is so great. And so we actually need to scroll through them and see what it is that is applicable to you. Something you also want to consider is what is your core ability and what do you have the ability to flex to easily and maybe a little more difficultly, right? So,
and what could be qualified differently, right? Because NAICS codes often are overlapping, right? So all of you have a NAICS code, right? But you might have a bunch of NAICS codes, or maybe you should have a bunch of NAICS codes, right? Could be aerospace is an aerospace a NAICS code, and machine shop is a NAICS code, and so you might overlap, and it's up to whomever decided, what should I make this part today? This fastener? Did I make it under machine shop, or did I make it under nuts, bolts, and fasteners?
yeah, it's a human inputted system, and a lot of the contracting officers that are doing it do it by best judgment, but don't definitively know. We were looking through NICS code, completely unrelated to anything that we had, and the NAVSEA was looking for somebody to review shock test procedures, right? And we were like, oh my God, how could that be in there, right? So we ourselves went and tried to bid after that. Plastics here, a little bit of a similar breakout, and what I'm going to say is it doesn't matter whether you're doing sheet metal, right? Plastics, plastic injection molded, plastic machining for making isolators, bumpers, obviously all the standard metals and stuff like that that you can think of. I feel bad sometimes when people are like, what's needed? And I give this general response of everything, because it's literally everything. You wouldn't believe how much rubber there is in a submarine, right? So let's say that you came and said, all right, we are interested in exploring this and seeing what work is available out there. This example that we have out here we did for a small fastener supplier in the state of Massachusetts. Yesterday I ran the report looking for something, and the number was 4,135, and it's actually vivid enough. If you look at the recording from the session earlier, it was the same number. There's that many open solicitations in the nation right now looking for nuts and bolts, and there are extravagant things like massive, we need to keep bulkheads, torpedo door on type nuts and bolts, to 3/8, 16, 2-inch socket head that you would get at Ace Hardware type deals, right? But the government needs somebody to buy those through. And so you could either be a supplier, that's kind of called pass-through, like a distributor, and or a manufacturer of it. And if you're a manufacturer, there's certainly some advantages to have there. This individual that we were working with was going to get quite overwhelmed if we sent a line item of 4,000 potential opportunities, right? So we said, what is it that you feel most comfortable with? And their response was, we know screws, right? So there was hundreds and hundreds of screws that are being looked at for. It was actually M106 screws, like standard machine head, button head screws that you can get any place, right? There was 4 or 5 contracts at like 68,000 for a quantity apiece. So if you were somebody who was capable of making that, you're talking about like hundreds of thousands of fasteners. But what, so maybe taking just a little bit of a step back, is NICS codes are the categories of work that are out there. We'd want to look at your primary categories and your subcategories, and then we can look at very specific opportunities. 10 minutes left. Then we can look at very specific opportunities, and maybe we look at like most recent or something like that, just to make the scope of it manageable. Go.
think I'm a little lost. Is
Okay.
MassMEP offering to come into our companies and help us figure out if we have something that would be applicable to one of these products?
So two things. Yes. Also helping roadmap you from where you're at to where you're going. So we kind of entertained the two because if you go roadmap and want to go do a bunch of work, you got to know what work is out there, right? So we could help you roadmap to your company, right? Where are you for workforce? Where are you for strategy? Where are you for supply chain? Your own supply chain, and then what can you provide as well? So yes, and it would be that guy, not me, but with us. Does that answer your question?
All right, so we talked about.
One thing I
Go
want to
ahead.
make clear about these guys that was differentiating for me, I was like, they're a fastener company. There's got to be a gazillion fastener companies out there. There must not be much of a need, but they're CMMC compliant.
And the traceability of the fastener.
Yeah, like that's their differentiator, right? So when I talked about this whole differentiating piece of like, some people are getting in because other people are getting out, right? So thinking about that and where you're going. And what you're capable of doing and willing to take on. Okay. So let's talk about the.
We talked about this one.
We did.
A
I think
little
I
bit
got it
already.
in order.
That's okay. It was actually me that went at it. But, we're going to talk about two categories here, right? In terms of how do you get into the system. I'm going to throw out a pet peeve of mine right off the bat. Is you hear people, we'll go in, we'll talk to a company. Are you interested in doing defense? Oh yeah, we'll do defense. We can do defense. We have a cage code, right? So you go into SAM.gov, you get a cage code which identifies you with the U.S. that you are in fact a business who has the ability to bid on and receive contracts. What it doesn't clear you for is to do defense work. And like certainly a miss that's happening out there, I'm going to relate this to CMMC, is we know that there's instances out there where people aren't necessarily doing this due diligence. To Brian's comment earlier about the volume need, when at the end of the Cold War, when defense budgets got cut significantly, it wiped out a lot of our small businesses and our industrial base, which is what we're struggling to get back up now. We atrophied in technical ability, we atrophied in manufacturing, and one of the places that we feel that we atrophied was in compliance and understanding contracts, right? Taking that, feeding that back to the paperwork and stuff like that, understanding what the real level of effort is needed to make something for a weapon of war.
I want to add to the paperwork thing. The beauty about all the paperwork, though, you could apply that to the cost of your goods, right? The government is willing to pay that. So traditionally, you'd have your commercial price, but you have your government price, which is inflated because of the cost to get all your requirements done, because of the extra program or project management required to do all the traceability and the auditing and all that. You could bake those costs into that cost of good to the government.
And often we'll hear both. When I've gone out and talked to probably 50 companies over the last 6 months about like, why are you in defense or why do you go to defense? What have you heard? Like I asked today, some are like, because I get great margin. And some are like, I don't want to do it because I have shit margin. Well, that's however you quoted it up front. And if you quoted it the same way from a commercial perspective and didn't think about all of the extra paperwork, but that's also where if you have it set up and you do it well and you know how to be compliant, you'll win, right? So it's really being strategic in thinking about how you can do that.
No, agreed. It's our acceleration engineering grant we call engineering as a business. First business class I ever took, I was like, oh my God, I'll never use any of this. And it's amazing that I'm up here like talking about this now. But it's if you don't understand what true level of effort is, right? I call it the basis of estimate, like the keystone piece to being able to be successful. So whether it's understanding your schedule, right, as a supplier, I'll repeat what I said earlier. There's some cultural things that come back in that. You know, we've all been in a situation before. We were in a conference room on a whiteboard, and people are going around and saying, "How long is it going to take you to do that? How long is it going to take you to do that? How long?" Right? And you put this proposal together in record time. 2 years later, you sit down and they say, we're completely over budget, our schedule's destroyed. How did this happen? How did this not happen, right? And so doing that due diligence from the get-go is how you're gonna be successful. So we gotta get you in SAM, because we gotta get you identified as somebody who can be awarded a contract. With regard to doing defense, we have to get you through ITAR. ITAR is how you're gonna know and understand and show that you understand how you're gonna process data. And you understand the importance of it, and that you don't just send defense data via email outside the US. Part of getting through ITAR right now is getting through CMMC. It was scary for me. One of the things that I'm not super technically strong on is some of my tech savviness. So we wrote a CMMC program ourselves using Office 365. It was a really good thing, because it forced me to go through the mechanics of it. But if you don't want to do that, there are a number of solutions out there, whether it's cloud-based or hardware-based. Small businesses based right out of Massachusetts that can put a server in, that everything is based out of that, and if you run into trouble, they can remote in and help you. So coming through CMMC is not as scary as you might think. But now that we know you understand the importance of the data that you have, and now that you have a cybersecurity solution in place to do it, we can apply for your JCP, which is acknowledgement of the Department of Justice that you are cleared to contribute to the defense base. So from a compliance standpoint, to get into the game, it's these 3 steps that we have to get you through.
Now, what if I'm just applying to a tier 4? Or
It's the
tier
same
3?
thing. And I'll link that to earlier where somebody says, "Oh, but I have a cage code," right? It's the due diligence of the higher you are on that tier to make sure that these requirements are flowing down. And what we're finding is huge misses in that. If we go through, we have another slide internally that talks where we mapped out the past 10 years of how many news headlines there's been. You can go Google, like the SSN John Warner, that boat had to get taken out of the water 3 times due to supplier misses. So this should be flowing down from a government to a GD to everybody that makes every piece part, including, going back to the fastener example, you yourselves. All right, now I'm gonna kind of
What's the approximate timeline from start to finish on that?
to get you in the system and
From
compliance.
the first time you log on to SAM.gov till you have that certificate?
Who's doing it? Depends on who's doing it. From what I've
Just
heard,
the manufacturer.
if you, oh yeah, I've started in it, I've gotten in it, and I think I'm in, and I'm not sure. Like, it really depends on your due diligence, which is, I've heard a lot of issues with it, which is part of why I started talking to that guy, because he knows how to do it. And the familiarity in his team, knowing how to do it and doing it themselves over and over again, it's really not a fun process. But for you doing it, for your team doing it,
I think I would say under most circumstances, let's call it 3 months. And probably the biggest, actually having your information and loading it into the system and stuff like that, that's not the difficult part. Let's just say there are other companies, there are commercial companies that are invoking CMMC right now, right? So maybe you're doing commercial work where that is a requirement because they want 2 minutes left. The anxiety, if you had that program in place already, that would certainly expedite it. The biggest thing in that is just making sure that you have it, and then making sure that you're comfortable with it and you understand how to go with it.
yeah, I mean, CMMC can take companies a variety of time due to cost and what they might already have in place.
Yeah, like we're personally going through CMC now. We're not going to have technically our CMC 2 until sometime in 26, but they don't care as long as we have the roadmap right up there. So
Another use of the word roadmap, different roadmap, but yeah.
different roadmap. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going back.
Let's
We
go.
got like 1 minute.
All right. So once you're in the system and you're eligible, right, what you need to do is be successful. If we get you in the system and you start bidding on different jobs and you're late, right, it will count against your supplier score. And the more counts you have against it, the least likely a contracting officer will take a look at that. Another thing is getting you in the system and getting you actively engaged and getting awarded some of these different things also helps with your ammunition being able to go to a large prime and say, I'm in the system, I've gone through those 3 steps, I understand the cybersecurity, and I'm actively acting as a prime, albeit on a lower level than what you are, right? But I have an evidence of satisfactory history behind it. It's important to understand we can use that rant about everybody being in and writing on a whiteboard and coming up with times and stuff like that. It's understanding your bid and proposal procedure and being able to take things like obsolescence into account ahead of time, right? How many people here have been in a situation where a contract's awarded, you start work, and then somebody raises their hand and says, oh, that's 6 months out, right? That's not satisfactory if you want to be successful. So the industry gets a lot of challenge from people that, in my experience, don't want to do that level of due diligence. But if you understand that level of due diligence needs to and has to be done, then you can work with it, not against it.
So the one thing I want to leave you with is, the purpose of today, right, is about understanding resources, giving you information that you might not already have, understanding sort of in totality. To go back to your question of so what are we offering, right? 2 things. If you're in the submarine industrial base or you have something that you can offer or you think you can offer, come talk to us. We can help you roadmap. There's a lot of resources out there, both in money, in workforce, there's so much going on that we've been understanding to help filter those with you, to you, whether it's through the road mapping process or just saying, oh yeah, there's this great talent pipeline program that's out there that Megan's working on that you should link up with, or that we're working on with, there's just a lot going on, and it's a lot. As a manufacturer, your heads are down, right? You're working on what to get out today, and so we're here to collect information to help you understand what you can do. And then, secondly is, Owen and his team helping them understand what's out there that you could make. So, any last questions before we give you to wrap up?
Just quick, the design due diligence, do you get into what technology or tools they're using from design to manufacture? Is that outside of the scope?
If I was to go into your organization and look at design due diligence, we're all using pretty much the same tools. What this really goes to is what do you have for a design process and what are the trap doors to invoke that due diligence. There's a mil-spec out there, 848, right? And it talks about system safety. And people often hear system safety and they're like, oh, don't get electrocuted, don't do this, right? But what it really has to do with is how have you looked at failure points, single point failure, everything. A submarine has a single point failure of a reactor on board, but there's efforts that were done to minimize the likelihood of a failure of that single point. How are you doing that in your design of the products?
So, just want to leave you with thinking about what your strategy is as business, and how you're going to move forward. Would love to talk more. Appreciate your time today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.